Walt Whitman in 1738 acknowledges the contribution of Spanish culture to the American identity when he asserts that, to that composite American identity of the future, Spanish character will supply some of the most needed parts. No stock shows grander historic retrospect, grander in religiousness and loyalty, or for patriotism, courage, decorum, gravity, and honor. By the time the English arrive in St. Augustine in the late 18th century, Britain itself was already moving closer, relatively speaking, to a more democratic and inclusive society. The dominance of Protestantism in Britain at this time is thought to have fostered a more egalitarian society, with broader levels of civic participation. All of these aspects of British culture, I would argue, fed in to the settlement in St. Augustine. Similarly, I think there's no doubt that African Americans, frequently freed slaves, also those that were fleeing from slavery in the states to the north of Florida, played a very significant part in shaping the identity of the city. Like their counterparts from the Old World, the African Americans were also seeking new beginnings, also seeking liberty, also seeking opportunities to succeed. This is evident in the settlement of Fort Mose and in their instrumental role that they played in the Battle of Fort Mose in 1740, where the British were defeated. From the settlement, I think, of the community of Lincolnville in the years after the Civil War, to the pivotal roles played by people like Dr. Robert Hayling in the Civil Rights Movement 100 years later, St. Augustine's black population has also consistently demonstrated all the determination, all the resilience of the colonists that preceded them. And lastly, on that note, I'll mention the Menorcans. The heritage of the Menorcans is clearly still very evident in St. Augustine today. When they arrived in 1768 as indentured servants under the command of Dr. Andrew Turnbull, they also show us the potential for new beginnings. When they arrive in New Smyrna after a harrowing journey, they faced untenable conditions, more closely resembling slavery than servitude. Surrounded by mangrove swamps and malaria, they were denied the opportunity to fish and hunt, unable to move any distance from the plantation. But in 1777, after they rebel, they flee north to St. Augustine to the protection of the British governor, and they remain today, as I said, a resilient, strong, and flourishing community, as they did under all subsequent flags in St. Augustine. So clearly, the history of St. Augustine, and I think of Florida more broadly, is a multifaceted one. And my purpose here, as I said, I'm not a historian, my purpose is not to retell the stories of the many cultures that constituted the mosaic of the state, but rather to regard them in a broader story of American identity. As Michael Walzer points out, there is no country called America. We live in the United States of America, and we appropriated the adjective American, even though we can claim no exclusive title to it. Canadians and Mexicans are also Americans, but they have adjectives more obviously their own. We have none. The United States has a peculiar anonymity. It is a name that doesn't even pretend to tell us who lives here. It is the diversity, I think, of the United States, a diversity that long predates the birth of the nation, that gave rise to an American identity that draws not on the past but on the future, on an idealized future that envisioned a land where anything was possible. America is West, a shining thing in the mind. Okay. So to round this off, I kind of want to draw together these colonial foundations into what I see as the very unique nature of contemporary American identity. If a central element of the American dream is a presumption, I would argue, that America can solve any problem, the experiences of the early colonists of Northeast Florida and the tumultuous history of St. Augustine itself lay testament to the fact that even in the land of plenty, the future is not guaranteed. Undoubtedly, the British, the Spanish, the French experienced innumerable failures as they struggled to find their fortune here. Disease, starvation, wars with each other, with the Native Americans, hounded their progress. And yet they persisted in their quest for freedom and opportunity. Two principles that lie at the heart of American identity. In fact, I think as Jefferson's Declaration suggests, freedom for America, for Americans, means opportunity. But for contemporary Americans, as for the colonists themselves, the ways in which freedom is exercised, the opportunities that we choose to grasp, and ultimately the results that we achieve are all infinitely varied. The American dream may not be a guarantee of success, but it does represent the possibilities that are inherent in a new world. The diversity of early colonial America, a diversity that is accentuated here in St. Augustine, creates an American identity that is not defined by the past, because there is no common history, but by the possibilities for the future. It is an identity that is born from determination, individualism, and self-reliance, the necessary prerequisites to survive in the wilderness of the New World. It was an identity that was, to some extent, anonymous, not built upon culture, not built upon national identity, nor upon religion or language or ethnicity. Instead, it is an identity that is shaped around the abstract principles of freedom, equality, and self-government. Ultimately, it was an intertwining of people and place that shaped American identity and created a very unique American culture, one that is simultaneously anonymous and yet defining. The symbols and ceremonies of Americanism are very illustrative of that. Think of the flag, the Pledge of Allegiance, the 4th of July, the Constitution, the Declaration. None of these things are inherited, they're all invented. They're all political in nature rather than cultural. Consider, and this is fascinating to me as somebody that is not an American, the McCarthyism of the 1950s, the House Committee on Un-American Activities. What does it mean to be un-American? If you accused my mother of being un-British, she'd probably think you were referring to her table manners. Un-American is a very uniquely American idea. And what it tells us is that being an American is not defined by who you are or where you come from. It is defined by what you believe. And herein, I think, lies, or may lie, the secret to America's success. There's no doubt that some 500 years after the Spanish set foot on North American shores, the Old World remains somewhat patronizing of its younger sibling. Europeans are very easily amused by American displays of patriotism. The stars and the stripes hanging on the back porch, the unlimited number of God Bless America songs, the shrine that is the nation's capital. But what the Old World may fail to realize is that what on the surface appear to be superficial and largely meaningless expressions of patriotism are also the key to American longevity. They're also the key to America's position as a powerful, stable, and most importantly, free liberal democracy. American identity is a political identity, just as American culture is a political culture. The only defining characteristic of all Americans, regardless of how they hyphenate themselves, is their beliefs, their trust in the Constitution, their persistent conviction that opportunities still exist for happiness and for material prosperity, their confidence that their nation can meet any challenge, and their faith in an ideology that is dedicated to human freedom. To be an American is to believe in new beginnings. To be an American is to dream. And I think some of you are probably thinking, Americans may no longer be so certain that that multifaceted dream is realizable. They may no longer be so certain that the future itself is limitless. But I would argue that if that's the case, then that uncertainty is a sign of maturity. Because maturity, I think, entails the recognition that what they are, as well as what they have been, are the future, are really the truths that Americans must live by. Thank you.